Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a journey that requires both an open mind and, I think, a sophisticated palate.
It certainly does.
We're diving deep into gastronomy, culinary preferences, and the surprisingly high-level language we actually need to describe our relationship with food.
And our source material for this is really rich. It's a highly detailed discussion from an advanced learner studio.
Okay.
And in it, participants explored not just their favorite meals, but the deep psychological and sensory reasons behind their choices.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. Our mission here is sort of twofold. First, to dissect the motivations and memories that dictate our predilection.
Our predilections, yeah.
That special liking we have for certain foods. And second, to equip you, the listener, with the advanced linguistic toolkit you need to articulate these really complex experiences.
Exactly. It's about moving past just saying, it's tasty.
Right. It's about achieving some kind of linguistic mastery.
What's fascinating here, and what really came out of the discussion, was how it revealed the subtle nuances of food appreciation.
Nuances.
It's the difference between, say, just noticing something is sweet and understanding the balance of that sweetness against acidity or bitterness.
I see.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the material makes a really powerful claim one will be exploring throughout this deep dive.
And what's that?
That taste is inextricably linked to emotion.
Inextricably linked. So impossible to separate.
Impossible.
That is the core philosophical thread then that runs through all the source material. It's suggesting that every time we choose, comfort over novelty or refinement over indulgence, we're actually making an emotional calculation.
We are. It's a subconscious negotiation.
So let's start setting the table. Let's look at some contrasting tastes and, what they tell us about the person who's eating. We have to begin with the inevitable, the quintessential question that you hear at almost every dinner party conversation.
Right. What's your favorite food?
Exactly. What is your absolute favorite dish? And the sources capture the difficulty of this perfectly. They compare the choice to asking a parent to pick a favorite child.
It's almost impossible.
It is, because the food we love serves so many different needs at different times.
Indeed. And what emerged from the discussion were two, I think, perfect opposing choices that illustrate this fundamental split in culinary philosophy.
Which is?
The preference for broad versatility versus the preference for sensory subtlety and precise execution.
Okay, let's start with the champion of versatility then. Neapolitan pizza. It's a classic. It's a global standard. But why did one participant choose this over, say, a really complicated French dish?
I think it's because of its foundational nature. Pizza, and specifically the Neapolitan style, was presented as the ultimate blank canvas.
A blank canvas.
Yeah, it adheres to a very simple, almost minimalist structure. You have dough, tomato, mozzarella, basil, but its success is entirely dependent on the quality of those few components and, of course, the mastery of the heat.
And the analysis of the sensory experience in the source material was, I thought, exceptional. It really highlighted exactly why that dish achieves this perfect status for some people.
Oh, it wasn't just a summary. It was a deep textural and flavor breakdown. They described the crust not just as, baked, but as crisp and blistered.
Right, those little black spots.
Exactly. That's the result of extreme quick heat, which provides that critical chew and that slightly smoky flavor. Then you have the careful balance.
Okay.
The acidity of the San Marzano tomatoes, which gives you that necessary sharp contrast. It cuts right through the richness.
And that richness brings us to one of our target C2 words, the mozzarella. It was described using that wonderful adjective, unctuous.
Yes, unctuous.
Now, this word is critical, isn't it? When you apply it positively to food, it means oily or rich or creamy, but in a beautifully pleasant way.
Precisely. We are not talking about something greasy and off-putting. The unctuousness of the mozzarella is that pliable, melting richness that gives the pizza its luxurious mouthfeel.
I see.
It's the sensation of that fat gently coating the palate. And when all those elements, the crisp chew, the sharp acidity, and the creamy richness come together, the source appropriately called it a symphony of textures.
That framing, the symphony, I love that. It really emphasizes harmony and complexity, even in what seems like a simple dish.
It does.
And beyond that, the selection of pizza also speaks to its cultural role, doesn't it? It's communal. It's meant to be shared casually.
It is. It embodies joy, gathering, and that sort of straightforward, immediate pleasure.
Now, compare that philosophy to the second preference that came up.
Sushi.
Sushi. A stark contrast.
Completely. If pizza is a symphony of combined components, sushi is a celebration of individual, pristine ingredients. It's highly refined, often individualized, and it demands a very, very high level of appreciation.
I wonder, though, and this is a bit of a challenge, is calling Neapolitan pizza the quintessential example a bit reductive? Doesn't that sort of ignore all the other amazing regional variations of pizza?
That's a fair point, and the source did touch on that. The participants weren't really arguing for Neapolitan as objectively the best pizza, but more as the most representative of that category of food.
Okay, representative.
Simple, foundational, and executed perfectly. With sushi, the focus shifts entirely. It moves away from that communal versatility and toward technical and sensory perfection.
Right.
The appreciation rests entirely on the quality of the raw material and the precision of the chef, the shokunin.
And that precision is so often defined by texture. The source absolutely nailed the description, saying that high-quality sashimi should possess a melt-in-the-mouth consistency, almost like butter.
And this point is completely non-negotiable for a real sushi connoisseur. If the fin is chewy or fibrous or watery, it just signals subpar quality or poor handling.
It's a deal breaker.
Totally. The expectation is that the texture must be tender, cold, and it has to dissolve on the tongue. It's a very subtle pleasure that demands your full attention, unlike the robust, immediate satisfaction of a pizza slice.
And this is why we use the term palate, right? It's not just about tasting. It's the capacity for appreciative discernment of flavor and texture.
That's it, exactly.
So what we have are two very different drives.
Mm-hmm.
The pizza lover is seeking this joyful, complex versatility, while the sushi lover is after technical, pristine subtlety. Hashtag, tag 1.2, the concept of acquired taste.
And this preference for sushi, it naturally leads us to a really key concept about how our tastes evolve over time.
Which is?
The acquired tastes. This is just fundamental to understanding culinary development.
Okay, can you define that for us clearly?
Sure. An acquired taste is any flavor profile. It could be bitterness, extreme funkiness, an unusual texture that you don't immediately enjoy. In fact, it might even be initially unpleasant.
Like blue cheese for a lot of people.
Blue cheese is the perfect example. Or very dark, bitter chocolate, or the distinct metallic tang of oysters. It's something you learn to appreciate through repeated, thoughtful exposure.
It's interesting how that requires both commitment and curiosity from the eater. You are essentially training your brain to recategorize a sensory signal from warning to reward.
Exactly. It's the expansion of your palate. When you confront these challenging flavors, you start to discern the subtle nuances that are hidden beneath the initial shock. And the source used the sushi example perfectly for this. For many, raw fish is challenging. It has a real intimidation factor.
And the suggestion the source offered to overcome this was wonderfully practical. It said you needn't start with raw delicacies.
Yes, the entry points are absolutely key. They cited tempura rolls. And why?
The crunch.
The crunch. Tempura offers an immediate recognizable pleasure, the delightful crunch, the warmth from the frying, the familiar texture. It essentially bridges the gap.
So it introduces the high-quality ingredients and the precise technique, but in a format that's a lot less, well, scary.
It lessens the cognitive load.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a great metaphor for all learning, isn't it?
Yeah.
Start with what's accessible, build up your competence, and then you can gradually introduce the more complex stuff.
It is. Whether it's raw fish or C2 vocabulary, confidence has to precede deep appreciation.
So the evolution of the palate requires recognizing and appreciating those subtle nuances that were just invisible to you before.
It also highlights that appreciation isn't static. We actively cultivate our tastes by deliberately seeking out challenging or unfamiliar experiences. It's an intellectual engagement with food, not just a physical one.
All right, let's pivot from the high art of favorite meals to what might be the most controversial meal of the day. Breakfast.
Oh, it's a battleground.
It really is. The philosophical differences here are so stark, and they reveal so much about our approaches to energy management and gratification.
They do. We saw a really clear contrast in the source material between those who favor immediate, heavy satiation and those who prioritize sustained light energy.
It's the decision between feeling grounded and feeling, lethargic.
Exactly. Hashtag tag 2.1, heavy start versus the less is more philosophy.
Okay, so the first approach is this less is more philosophy. The light approach. This seems like a highly conscious, almost strategic culinary choice.
It is. The preference mentioned was Greek yogurt topped with antioxidant-rich berries and a little drizzle of organic honey. It's a meal that's been meticulously designed.
And the core motivation, as the source emphasized, is all about avoiding that feeling of being lethargic.
Right.
And to be lethargic means you feel sluggish, apathetic, heavy. It's that classic mid-morning crash we all know.
Yeah.
Why does that happen physiologically after a heavy breakfast?
Well, it's the high glycemic load. If you consume a really dense meal that's high in simple carbohydrates, like, say, sugary cereal or enormous stacks of white pancakes, you flood your system with glucose.
Okay.
That triggers a massive insulin spike. And while this gives you immediate energy, the subsequent crash leaves you feeling drained, slow, and unable to focus.
So the light approach is strategic. It uses protein from the yogurt and complex carbs from the berries to prioritize sustained energy and mental clarity.
It's a fuel choice for high performance.
Now, let's look at the polar opposite, the person who has a penchant for the savory and substantial.
A penchant, yes. A strong inherent liking or preference for something.
And this person is driven by a deep need for robust satisfaction and grounding, right? They want a meal that feels substantial enough to truly anchor them for the day.
That's right. They're focused on immediate fullness and the sensory pleasure of that morning indulgence, and they seem, well, pretty unconcerned with the potential afternoon slump.
And this leads us right to the heart of complex flavor seeking, because the substantial breakfast that was described was specifically chosen not just for its volume, but for its dynamic flavor profile.
Yes. The substantial breakfast preference centered on pancakes paired with crispy saline bacon. This isn't just a big meal, it's an exercise in flavor dynamics.
The source described the interplay between the sweet maple syrup and the saline crunch of the bacon as unrivaled. It seems to suggest that the highest culinary pleasure is often found in friction, in contrast.
And this is a perfect example to define the term juxtaposition.
Okay.
Juxtaposition just means placing two contrasting things close together to highlight their difference. In art, it might be a dark shadow next to a bright light.
Right.
In food, the juxtaposition of the dominant soft sweetness of the pancake and syrup and the sharp, crispy, salty flavor of the bacon elevates both components. The sweetness seems sweeter, and the saltiness seems sharper.
It creates a truly stimulating experience for a complex palate.
Exactly.
So the palate that appreciates this kind of juxtaposition is one that seeks complexity and dynamism. It refuses to be satisfied by a single monolithic flavor profile.
They want that constant push and pull between extremes.
And the discussion then rightly broadened out to general preferences for sweet versus savory. The classic affliction, of course, is the sweet tooth.
An idiom for a strong preference for sugary foods.
But even here, sophistication comes into it. The participant with the sweet tooth specifically favored dark chocolate, noting that the inherent bitterness balances the sugar perfectly.
And there it is again. We see the appreciation for juxtaposition. The pleasure isn't in maximizing the sugar, but in balancing that sweetness against a complementary, challenging flavor.
And the counter-preference,
Yes.
savory weakness.
Yes. The admission was that when faced with a bowl of artisanal potato chips or salted pretzels, self-control just evaporates.
Yeah,
Gone. And this preference focuses on two really primal needs, salt and crunch.
I think the choice of artisanal potato chips is key there. It indicates that it's not just any processed snack. It's a specific craving for high-quality, perfectly seasoned, and textured savory goods.
I agree. It is that saline crunch that provides the immediate, potent sensory satisfaction. It overrides all rational thought about moderation.
And the texture, the sound, and feel of the crunch is arguably just as important as the taste itself.
Absolutely. So what this whole section on breakfast shows us is that even at the very start of our day, our choices are deeply psychological. They reflect our internal wiring, whether we prioritize stability and lightness or robust, dynamic sensory gratification rooted in strong flavor juxtaposition.
Let's shift now from consumption to creation. Let's look at how we define ourselves in the kitchen, because our cooking ability, or lack thereof, says a tremendous amount about our relationship with control, creativity, and complexity.
It does, and we should introduce the term culinary adept.
Okay.
This describes someone who is highly skilled or proficient in the art of cooking, and the sources offered a brilliant contrast between two personality types, which really define the limits of their culinary repertoire.
The culinary repertoire. So that's the stock of skills and dishes a person habitually uses. On one side, we have the enthusiastic amateur.
Yes, This is the cook who sees recipes not as gospel, but as guidelines.
Right. A starting point.
A starting point. They thrive on improvisation, viewing the kitchen as a kind of laboratory for creative expression. Their joy comes from experimentation, from substituting ingredients, and tweaking spice levels based on intuition.
They're adaptable, flexible, and their repertoire is constantly expanding.
They might specialize in a few cuisines, or they might just improvise widely without deep mastery of any single one. But the key ingredient is confidence.
So their philosophy is all about continuous learning and the satisfaction of problem solving. They're actively engaging with the nuances of flavor profiles and technical requirements.
Exactly. Their willingness to fail is what allows their repertoire to flourish. Now, you contrast this with the hopeless cook.
The hopeless cook.
This individual has a strictly limited repertoire, which was defined, I think humorously in the source, as being limited to toast.
Chuckles. Just toast.
They rely on simple assembly meals or dining out because the complexities of cooking just induce stress for them.
But the source found a fascinating silver lining for the hopeless cook, didn't it?
It did. While they may lack a broad repertoire, they often achieve mastery in one very narrow essential field. The example cited was achieving consistent perfection in the toaster settings, the perfect golden brown hue every time.
I love that.
It's a subtle, hilarious observation that highlights that even the least skilled cook seeks consistency and competence where they can find it. It's almost a psychological defense mechanism against the chaos of complexity.
That's a crucial insight. So the hopeless cook prioritizes predictability and control, while the enthusiastic amateur prioritizes discovery and complexity.
And both define their self-worth through their output, just on vastly different scales.
And the common thread, regardless of skill, is that the food we eat, whether we prepare it ourselves or someone else does, is often called upon to satisfy needs that go far beyond mere hunger. Hashtag tag 3.2, the healing power of comfort food and nostalgia.
Which transitions us perfectly to the deep, resonant concept of comfort food.
Food that soothes the soul. It's the ultimate culinary emotional repair kit.
It is. And the sources identified two primary categories of this kind of comfort seeking. First, there's the simple indulgent option.
The juicy cheeseburger with all the trimmings.
Exactly. This is pure, unadulterated, fast-acting indulgence. It's quick, it's satisfying, and it requires no emotional investment or preparation effort. It's an immediate, primal reset button for a stressful day.
And the second type?
The second is the deeply personal remedial option. Grandmother's chicken soup.
Ah, yes.
This is described as not just a meal, but a remedy. It's the type of food we seek out when we are physically ill, emotionally depleted, or just longing for some certainty.
So why is that soup remedial? It's because comfort food is, as the source says, deeply tied to nostalgia.
That's the core of it. We are not just craving the sodium and the warmth. We are craving the feeling, the environment, and the sense of being cared for that the food represents.
Nostalgia, that sentimental longing for a happy period in the past.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting, connecting taste, memory, and emotion with some very high-level vocabulary. This mechanism of emotional transport has a specific, elegant name.
It does. It's called the Proustian moment.
The Proustian moment.
This is the sophisticated term for a sudden, involuntary memory, a flash of the past, that's triggered by a taste, a smell, or a sound. It's named after Marcel Proust, whose character in Search of Lost Time ate a Madeleine cake dipped in tea.
And it instantly transported him back to his childhood home.
Instantly. The neurological connection here is key. The areas of our brain that process scent and taste are located right next to the hippocampus and the amygdala, the centers for memory and emotion.
So the smell or taste bypasses the rational mind and connects you directly to the past. It's an involuntary transport. You can't control it.
You can't. And this is the strongest piece of evidence supporting that original claim that food is inextricably linked to emotion.
Right.
When you eat that chicken soup, you aren't just ingesting liquid, you are ingesting the memory of the kitchen, the warmth, the sound of your grandmother's voice.
So the choice of comfort food is often a subconscious attempt to restore an internal emotional balance that has been disrupted.
That's it in a nutshell.
Wow. Okay, so we've established these deep psychological drivers behind our predilections, and we've introduced the sophisticated language, the gastronomy vocabulary that's required to talk about them with real precision. So now let's try and synthesize all that knowledge. So we have meticulously woven 10 C2 level terms into our discussion so far. But instead of a dry numbered recap, which is Never fun.
Never.
We're going to demonstrate their application. We're going to use this sophisticated language to analyze a hypothetical, complex culinary experience. This will show you how to articulate the full scope of flavor, emotion, and technical execution.
Great idea. Let's imagine a highly ambitious dish, something modern and complex, say. A deconstructed fermented carrot preparation served with a savory smoked cream and a sprinkling of bee pollen.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
We are now going to review the terms by describing this meal, proving that you can now analyze a meal far beyond just saying, I like it or I don't.
Fantastic. So if I'm looking at this deconstructed carrot dish, the first thing I notice is how many different flavors and textures are at play. It's definitely not a simple dish. How would we capture that complexity?
We would immediately talk about the nuances. The nuances of the dish are the subtle differences in flavor. You have the sweetness of the carrot, then the sharpness from the fermentation, the smokiness of the cream, and the earthy, delicate floral hint of the pollen.
A beginner might only register sweet and salty.
Exactly. But a connoisseur notices the specific layered nuances of the ingredients.
And the technical skill involved in getting those specific flavors. That's where we use that big umbrella term for the whole endeavor.
That's right. We are discussing gastronomy. This isn't just cooking. It's the art and practice of choosing, cooking, and eating high-quality food, incorporating culture and science. This experimental, highly technical approach is the very definition of modern gastronomy.
Now, if a chef consistently focuses on these challenging, often bitter or fermented flavor profiles, we could say that reflects his personal taste, a strong, inherent liking.
That would be his predilection. He has a predilection for challenging, savory, and perhaps fermented flavors. This is his default setting, his special liking that drives his culinary creativity.
Okay, looking at the dish again, how would you describe that smoked cream component? It sounds rich and maybe a bit heavy, but hopefully in a good way.
Well, it needs to be described as unctuous. That smoked cream, if it's executed correctly, must be oily and rich, and it has to coat the mouth pleasantly. It's the melting fat delivering the smoky flavor.
If it were just greasy, it would be a failure.
A total failure. To be unctuous is to deliver richness in its most luxurious, positive form.
And what about the combination of the fermented carrot, which might be sharp and sour against that sweet, smoky cream? That's not a natural pairing.
And that tension is the juxtaposition. The fact that those two starkly contrasting flavors, the acidic sharpness of the fermentation and the smooth, smoky richness of the cream, are placed together is the point.
Yep.
The juxtaposition of the two forces the palate to engage with both flavors intensely, and it prevents the experience from becoming boring or monolithic.
And the ability to appreciate that juxtaposition confirms that the diner has a complex palate.
Right. It refers to their overall appreciation and discernment of taste and flavor. It signals someone who doesn't shy away from complexity.
Now let's bring in the concepts from our breakfast discussion. If a diner were to eat, say, 3 portions of this rich, highly unctuous dish, what might the consequence be later in the evening?
They might feel lethargic.
Ah, there it is.
Sluggish and apathetic, perhaps due to the heavy fat content and richness requiring significant digestive effort. Choosing to eat such a rich meal is a trade-off immediate sensory pleasure versus later energy.
And if the chef created this dish, it expands his
repertoire.
Yes, his repertoire, the stock of skills he habitually uses. This dish now joins his established repertoire of high-level gastronomy.
And finally, let's imagine the diner tastes the bee pollen, and that specific, delicate floral note instantly reminds them of the scent of their grandparents' garden during summer holidays.
That is the Proustian moment. That involuntary memory, triggered by the taste and scent, instantly transporting them back to the emotional security of their childhood.
And it is the ultimate proof that the food experience is inextricably linked to emotion.
You see, by integrating those 10 terms into a critical analysis like that, you demonstrate mastery. You're not just recalling definitions.
Not at all. You are using the precise language needed to articulate a sophisticated culinary critique.
This level of detail allows you to be an articulate connoisseur of gastronomy. Hashtag OTRO, connecting the dots.
So to summarize this deep dive, we've confirmed that understanding food is a really multi-layered affair. It requires moving beyond just ingredients to address cultural context, psychological motivation, and critically, the high-level language needed to articulate texture, memory, and emotional connection.
We've shown how personal choices, from the versatility of pizza to the juxtaposition in a high-carb breakfast, are all reflections of these deeper drives. And this knowledge, when it's paired with a commanding repertoire of sophisticated language, allows you to express the true depth and the nuances of your culinary experiences.
Your ability to talk about the unctuousness of a sauce or the specific predilections of a chef demonstrates true fluency, both in cuisine and in conversation.
So we'll leave you with one final thought, something for you to mull over that builds on this fundamental link between taste and feeling. If comfort food is fundamentally a remedy, a search for a feeling of safety or warmth or restoration that's rooted in your childhood, does identifying what you crave, that specific cheeseburger, that specific chicken soup, does it reveal something profound about the emotional state you are trying to restore in the present moment?
That's a great question. We'd encourage you to reflect on your own personal Christian moments. What single taste or smell instantly transports you back, and what emotional security does that memory restore for you today?
And use the language we've shared to analyze that craving. You might just learn something profound about yourself.
I think you will.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive, and stay curious.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take complex source material, the articles, the research, the deep notes, and we pull out the most valuable, insightful, and honestly surprising knowledge.
All to give you that ultimate shortcut to being truly well-informed.
Exactly. And today, we are not just talking about food. We are getting into a really sophisticated, sometimes almost brutal discourse on culinary controversies, authenticity, and the dining experience.
Indeed. We're moving well beyond, simple recipes and appreciation.
Way beyond.
We're heading into the realm of fierce philosophical debate, complex cultural heritage, and that crucial social ritual of sharing a meal.
And the source material you shared, it highlights that food is just never merely sustenance, is it?
Not at all. It's a profound philosophical and, in some cases, even a scientific battleground.
Absolutely. The documents we've been reviewing are incredibly rich. I mean, they show that the culinary world is discussed using language that you'd expect to find in like a political or a historical dissertation.
Yeah.
So our mission today is very targeted. We are extracting the most crucial arguments, the divisive questions, and I think most importantly, the advanced high-level vocabulary you need to participate in this discourse with real proficiency and nuance.
We want you to be able to talk about the deeper architecture of food culture.
Exactly that.
And that level of analysis is, it's why we're here. We are aiming for C2 proficiency level insights, which means we aren't just summarizing what people eat.
No.
We are synthesizing the sociological, the anthropological, and even the biological factors that govern our food choices and our dining habits.
So we're really spanning the entire spectrum.
The whole spectrum, from highly specific, genetically divisive ingredients, all the way to broad, complex questions about cultural preservation and the sacred rules of dining etiquette.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately. Because when you're discussing food controversies, you have to start with the arguments that really go for the jugular.
Absolutely.
We are starting with the most vulnerable, the most emotionally charged points of the entire culinary canon. So we are diving straight in, right into what our sources call the most trivial, yet somehow the most intensely debated question in the modern culinary world.
It's astonishing, isn't it, the level of emotional investment in this one?
It is, which, it makes it a fantastic case study for linguistic analysis. I am talking, of course, about the infamous inclusion of pineapple on pizza.
And this is precisely where we see the immediate deployment of hyperbole.
Okay.
That language used to exaggerate for effect. The opponent, who we can sort of label the purist, they frame their stance not as a simple dislike, but as an opposition to something that's fundamentally and morally wrong.
Right. It's not just, I don't like this.
Exactly. The source material shows them describing the inclusion of pineapple as an act of sacrilege.
Sacrilege. Wow. The violation or misuse of what is regarded as sacred. I mean, it's truly fascinating how a term usually reserved for, deep religious or profound moral offenses can be applied to a combination of fruit and baked dough.
It really is.
So what does this tell us about the nature of the purists' belief system when it comes to food?
Well, it tells us that for the purist, the Italian pizza, especially, the Neapolitan iteration, it possesses a kind of culinary telos.
A telos.
An inherent and immutable purpose or end goal. That goal is savory perfection, driven by structural integrity and the subtle balance of simple, traditional ingredients.
Okay, so it has a destiny in a way.
In a way, yes. And so when pineapple, with its unique texture and pronounced sweetness, is introduced, it doesn't just alter the flavor.
It violates the plan.
It violates the dish's fundamental purpose. The purist describes the result not just as bad food, but as an abomination.
An abomination. That's an even stronger word.
A thing that causes profound disgust or hatred. I mean, the language is incredibly powerful.
And the specific technical critique, as you mentioned, it seems to focus heavily on the texture clash.
Very much so. Cooked pineapple is, it's warm, it can be mushy, and it releases moisture.
Which would make the crust soggy.
It compromises the structural integrity of the crust and the balance of the cheese. But critically, it's the sweetness.
Right.
The purist argues that the intrinsic sweetness of the cooked fruit undermines the required savory integrity of the core components. The high-acid tomato, the rich, fatty cheese, and the salty processed meats like ham or bacon. The balance is it's ruined.
Because the savory profile is dominated by a sugary counterpoint.
Exactly.
But isn't the argument for the defender of Hawaiian pizza rooted in that very tension? I mean, every great culinary experience relies on a dynamic interplay of tastes, textures, temperatures.
Well, that is precisely where the counter-argument finds its strength.
The power of sweet and salty juxtaposition.
Exactly. For the defender, the fruit isn't just sweet, it's also acidic. And when the sugar caramelizes slightly in the oven, it provides this sharp acidic contrast that actually cuts through the richness and the fat of the cheese and meat.
So it's an act of culinary balancing.
It is. It's creating a dynamic profile rather than a static, monochromatic one. It's interesting. The original creator of the Hawaiian pizza, Sam Panopoulos, he was a Greek immigrant in Canada.
Okay.
He wasn't trying to desecrate Italian food. He was exploring the sweet and sour combinations that were popular in Chinese cuisine, which he then adapted to the pizza format. It was an act of accidental amalgamation.
And that historical nugget is it's vital, isn't it?
It is.
It shows that even in these seemingly trivial controversies, the language used, sacrilege, abomination, it's so disproportionate to the actual culinary offense.
Completely. It's not just about the fruit, it's become a kind of proxy war.
The proxy war for what?
For defending a rigid cultural canon against the forces of modernization and cultural exchange. So analyzing the hyperbole tells you more about the speaker's adherence to tradition than it does about the quality of the pizza itself.
That's a fascinating point. So if the pineapple debate is a philosophical war of taste and tradition, our next ingredient introduces a true biological war.
Absolutely. We're moving from subjective preference to scientific reality. The curious, polarizing case of coriander, or as is known in the U.S., cilantro.
This is a remarkable case study. I mean, the term polarizing is perfect here because it literally means dividing opinion into two sharply contrasting, often antagonistic groups. And unlike the pizza debate, where you could intellectually convince someone to maybe try the other side, the aversion to coriander has a clear biological basis.
Precisely. For approximately 4 to 14% of the global population, depending on ethnicity, coriander tastes distinctly like soap.
Like actual soap.
Or dirt, or even crushed bugs. This is not a choice. It is a genetically influenced predisposition, and it's attributed to a specific olfactory receptor gene, most notably OR6A2.
So let's go deeper into that science hook, the term olfactory. It relates directly to the sense of smell. What exactly is this gene doing to the flavor experience?
Okay, so the OR6A2 gene is responsible for detecting chemical compounds known as aldehydes.
Aldehyde.
Yes. And coriander leaves contain several of these short-chain aldehydes, primarily one called E2-alkanol. For most people, these aldehydes contribute to the herb's bright, vibrant, citrusy freshness.
That's what I taste.
Right. But for those carrying the specific variant of the OR6A2 gene, their olfactory receptors bind to these aldehydes in a way that triggers the recognition of similar compounds found in soap.
Wow.
Or in certain types of fatty acids that go rancid. It's a primal, instant chemical signal of non-food.
That completely reframes the entire argument, doesn't it?
It does.
It means when you encounter someone who passionately despises cilantro, they are experiencing a fundamentally different chemical reality than you are. Their brain is processing a key component of that flavor as a substance that is entirely inappropriate for consumption.
And that genetic reality makes the polarization entirely understandable. The person isn't just being stubborn or picky. They're reacting to a literal chemical alarm signal in their brain. However, for those not afflicted, for whom the herb delivers what our sources describe as a wonderful lift in heavier dishes, it is indispensable.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, can you imagine Mexican salsa verde or a complex South Asian chutney without that sharp, vibrant, herbaceous punch?
The dish would lose its necessary brightness. It would feel flat.
And this also subtly connects back to culture, right? I read that while genetics predisposes us, some researchers suggest that cultural exposure, particularly early and frequent exposure, can sometimes help individuals train their palate to override the genetic signal.
It's rare. But yes, it suggests that while the biological wiring is there, the environment and persistent cultural practice play an ongoing role in food acceptance.
It's a powerful demonstration of how chemistry, genetics, and culture all intersect on the most fundamental level of taste.
It really is.
Now that we've established that this battlefield exists even on the scale of a single leaf or a slice of fruit, let's zoom out. Let's look at the broader philosophy of how dishes and entire cuisines evolve.
This leads us directly to the tension between honoring tradition and embracing novelty. You stated earlier that you deeply respect culinary heritage, but that culinary stagnation is the enemy of progress. That seems like the central conflict here.
It is the defining dilemma of modern cooking, I think. The question is, must a dish be strictly authentic, meaning, made exactly according to its original tradition, geography, and method, to be enjoyable or even to be considered important?
The purist would say yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you change the technique, the origin of the ingredient, or the context, you lose the essence of the dish.
And they have a valid point. I mean, the value of respecting culinary heritage and preserving traditional recipes is immensely high. These recipes are, in a sense, historical documents.
Okay.
They contain the accumulated flavors and techniques that define a people, a region, a historical moment. They provide a foundational understanding of what a cuisine is. Losing them is like losing historical and cultural memory. But if we were truly slaves to a rigid definition of authenticity, wouldn't all global cuisines be vastly impoverished today? We would essentially freeze food history at a moment in time and declare all subsequent adaptation invalid.
Precisely. The counter-argument is that absolute, uncompromising adherence to a past state leads to culinary stagnation. If we never allowed cooks to experiment with new ingredients, new techniques, or materials from different geographies, the food world would indeed freeze.
And if you look at
historically, almost every authentic dish celebrated today was once a radical innovation.
Right. It resulted from trade or migration or conquest.
Which is where the sophisticated term amalgamation becomes critical.
Absolutely. Amalgamation, the action or process of uniting or merging two or more things, it's the true engine of culinary history.
It is. Many of the world's greatest dishes were born from this merging of different food cultures. I mean, take the classic example, the use of tomatoes in Italian cuisine.
Right. They weren't originally from Italy.
Not at all. Tomatoes are native to the Andes in South America. Before the 16th century, no authentic Italian dish contained them. Their introduction and eventual mastery by Italian cooks is a defining moment of successful amalgamation.
We see that same principle in Asia. For example, Peruvian cuisine, which is often cited in advanced culinary texts, is a perfect blend. It includes chifa,
The fusion of Cantonese Chinese immigration with native Peruvian ingredients.
which gave us dishes like lomo saltado, a classic.
That's a fantastic example of respectful amalgamation. Even more complex is Nikkei cuisine, the blending of Japanese immigrants' techniques.
Their precision, their focus on raw fish and umami.
With the bright, acidic flavors and ingredients of Peru, like ají peppers and lime, this isn't just mixing ingredients. It's a deep respect for two opposing philosophies of cooking that results in a genuine new cuisine, not just some fleeting trend.
So amalgamation is good, it's necessary, and it's historically validated. But that brings us to the next very important dividing line, the crucial difference between successful, thoughtful fusion and catastrophic confusion.
Right.
What establishes that fine line? When does respectful amalgamation cross into just gimmickry?
I think it comes down entirely to respect for the ingredients, the technique, and, crucially, the intention behind the combination. Innovation occurs when flavors are combined thoughtfully.
What does thoughtfully mean in this context?
It means the chef understands why certain flavors work together. Perhaps they share aromatic compounds, or they balance different mouthfeels. They respect the structural and proportional integrity of the original components and are aiming for a genuine culinary evolution.
So it has to have a narrative reason for existing beyond just, look what I did.
Exactly. But confusion, or what you might call a culinary disaster, that occurs when ingredients are thrown together haphazardly.
Haphazardly.
Yes, meaning lacking any obvious principle of organization or logic. It's an approach driven by novelty, for novelty's sake, aiming to shock or attract attention, often for social media virality, rather than genuinely elevating the cuisine.
Our sources provide the classic cautionary tale here, the sushi burrito. On paper, it sounds efficient. All the flavor of sushi, packaged for portability. But the sources categorize it clearly as a failure to achieve genuine evolution.
And the reasons for that failure are really instructive for anyone evaluating modern food trends. The critique highlights 3 major functional flaws that destroy the intended experience.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, the proportions were all wrong. Sushi relies on these delicate, precise ratios of fish to rice to vegetable. A massive rolled-up tortilla-sized sheet of nori just throws that entire delicate ratio out of whack. You lose the nuance of the sushi rice seasoning, the sherryan.
So the balance is gone. And second, the lack of structural elegance seems to have been fatal.
It was. It felt inherently like a gimmick.
Just for show.
It didn't emerge from a natural blending of cultures over time, like Chifa or Nikki cuisine. It was a sudden self-conscious mashup designed purely for marketability. It lacks the sincerity of true amalgamation.
And
Third, and perhaps most damningly for the actual dining experience, it was noted as being incredibly cumbersome to eat.
right.
The functional elegance of sushi, its neat, bite-sized delivery system, was destroyed by the attempt to make it portable and oversized.
That is the essential synthesis for advanced analysis, then. Evaluating food trends requires you to distinguish between thoughtful amalgamation, where 2 traditions meet and are balanced, and a haphazard combination, where the end result is just cumbersome, proportional chaos driven primarily by superficial novelty.
The difference is intention and execution.
Exactly. And this naturally transitions us, because once you've resolved the issue of the plate itself, the ingredients, the recipe, you have to consider the environment. A meal is only partly about the food.
The rest is theater and human interaction.
Okay, so we've analyzed the chemistry and the anthropology of the food. Now we shift focus entirely to the actual experience. When we dine out, how much weight should we place on the environmental factors, the ambiance, the service, versus the sheer objective quality of the cooking?
This is the eternal debate among restaurant critics, isn't it?
It is.
And it creates a profound dichotomy in how people value the experience. On one side, you have the food purist view. This individual believes that food quality, when executed at the highest level, is transcendent.
Transcendent meaning it's exceptional, beyond the normal or merely physical human experience.
Exactly. This purist is willing to tolerate a lackluster setting.
What does that look like?
A dingy room, bad lighting, maybe even plastic chairs, if the food achieves that level of perfection. They understand that perfection often comes from an obsessive focus on the plate, often in establishments where resources just weren't spent on interior design.
Right.
Their best meals, as the sources note, may have been in these hole-in-the-wall spots where the chef's execution is faultless, proving that the environment is ideally irrelevant.
But then you have the opposing view, the social view, which I think probably describes the majority of the population when they seek out fine dining.
I'd agree.
This perspective posits that dining is fundamentally a social ritual and an act of conviviality.
Conviviality. The quality of being friendly, lively, and enjoyable is the very purpose of dining socially. For this diner, the experience is a comprehensive package. The meal is merely the central prop for the real drama.
Human connection.
Human connection and shared enjoyment.
And this is where external non-food factors can absolutely tarnish the experience, regardless of how skilled the chef is.
Oh, completely. You might have a perfectly executed dish, but if the restaurant setting actively works against that social ritual, the evening is destroyed.
So what are some of the specifics? What ruins conviviality?
Well, the critiques often cite terrible acoustics as a major culprit. If the room is so loud, perhaps due to poor design, exposed hard materials, or loud music, that you have to shout to your companion, the intimacy and the ability to converse easily are gone.
It becomes stressful.
Shouting transforms a relaxing, shared experience into an exhausting, fragmented one. And it even changes how your brain processes flavor. That kind of sensory overload detracts from gustatory focus.
And then there's the human element, the service.
Yes. Perhaps even worse than noise is brusque service.
Define brusque.
It means abrupt or offhand in speech or manner. When service is cold, mechanical, or unwelcoming, it creates this palpable sense of anxiety and discomfort. The food might be exquisite, regardless of how exquisite the soufflé is, as one source puts it. But if the service is condescending or hurried or just cold, the essential act of conviviality is destroyed. We are sensitive creatures, and that poor human interaction can override even the most transcendent ingredients.
That's the critical takeaway, isn't it? In the social view, the subjective experience of being treated poorly can completely negate the objective excellence of the cooking.
The waiter is as much a part of the narrative of the meal as the chef.
So if bad acoustics and brusque service are environmental factors that destroy the experience, there's one modern factor that destroys the necessary social connection instantly. The ultimate modern faux pas.
We have to talk about it.
We must address the mobile phone at the dinner table. Our sources identify this as the height of bad manners, and this speaks directly to the anthropological foundation of dining.
It's more than just rude. It fundamentally changes the nature of the shared meal. The act of pulling out that phone, or even just placing it face up on the table, it signals to everyone present one profound antisocial truth. It signals to your companion that the digital world, the potential distraction of a text, an alert, or an email, is potentially more engaging than their actual physical presence.
Ouch.
It instantly severs the connection. When two or more people gather for this ancient, powerful ritual of eating together, the entire social contract is built on the expectation of shared attention and shared focus.
If the phone is active or even visibly present, you're fracturing that collective experience.
You are. It transforms a communal ritual into a series of disconnected parallel activities. The focus shifts from the shared world of the table to the solitary world of the screen.
And you can trace this back thousands of years. The idiom, breaking bread.
It carries immense cultural weight. It implies trust, vulnerability, shared life, mutual focus. Historically, sharing food required vulnerability, and it demanded attention to the group for survival. The phone is the modern antithesis of that connection.
So we have to consciously choose connection over distraction.
If we want to reap the emotional and sociological benefits of conviviality, yes. The ultimate conclusion here is that the act of being present, of dedicating your full, undivided attention, is paramount. It is the core requirement of the social ritual.
We have covered so much philosophical and scientific territory today. I mean, we've moved from genetics to etiquette, from textural clashes to transcendent quality.
We really have.
So now for the advanced learner, we want to provide the essential linguistic toolkit. The sophisticated discourse we've just engaged in relies so heavily on high-level C2 proficiency vocabulary.
And because we've integrated these terms organically throughout the discussion, this section really serves as a review and a recontextualization to ensure you fully grasp their power when engaging in critical evaluation. Let's start with the language of conflict.
First, we have jugular. We use the idiom, go for the jugular. This is such a powerful metaphor, meaning to attack the most vital or vulnerable point in an argument.
For example, when a critic dismisses a popular dish based on its ethical sourcing, they're going for the jugular, hitting the core weakness of the product.
Exactly. Second, contentious. This perfectly describes any topic likely to cause an argument or disagreement.
The entire subject of food culture, where personal preference meets deep-seated tradition, is inherently contentious.
For example, debating the environmental impact of certain farming practices is a highly contentious global issue.
Absolutely. Third, sacrilege. The violation or misuse of what is regarded as sacred. We saw this used hyperbolically with pineapple on pizza.
Right, in a humorous way.
But you can also use it seriously. If a sommelier were to serve wine in a chipped plastic cup at a Michelin-starred restaurant, that might be perceived as a sacrilege against the craft of service.
Oh, definitely. Fourth, abomination. A thing that causes disgust or hatred. This is the ultimate expression of revulsion.
And if a new recipe fundamentally violates established laws of flavor, a critic might describe it as an abomination to highlight their profound, visceral reaction to it.
Right. Fifth, polarizing. This is essential for describing societal dynamics. It means dividing opinion into two sharply contrasting groups.
We applied this perfectly to the genetic divide of cilantro, but any new radical culinary movement, like the rise of insect-based protein, is naturally going to be polarizing.
Very true. Sixth, olfactory. Simply put, this relates to the sense of smell.
We use it to describe the genetic reality of the cilantro aversion, the specific olfactory receptor gene. This term is crucial when you're discussing high-level flavor profiling, particularly in wine, coffee, or complex spice blends.
Okay. Seventh, amalgamation. This is the positive term for the process of uniting or merging two or more different things.
And we used it extensively to describe successful fusion cuisine, such as the historical amalgamation that created Nikkei cuisine or Tex-Mex.
Right. Eighth, haphazardly. This describes doing something in a manner lacking any obvious principle of organization or logic, just randomly.
A chef who experiments by throwing ingredients together haphazardly without checking for complementary chemical compounds or structural balance is likely to create a disaster.
A culinary disaster. Ninth, transcendent. Beyond or above the range of normal or merely physical human experience, exceptional.
This is the highest compliment you can give to food quality. A perfect cup of coffee or a flawlessly simple dish that evokes a profound emotion can be considered transcendent.
Okay. 10th, brusque. Abrupt or offhand in speech or manner. We applied this to poor service.
A host who greets you without acknowledging your reservation or a waiter who just drops the plate without explanation is exhibiting brusque behavior, and it undermines the entire convivial atmosphere.
It really does. 11th, conviviality. The quality of being friendly, lively, and enjoyable. It captures the essential atmosphere required for shared dining.
The lighting, the music, the seating arrangement, everything should foster a sense of lively and friendly conviviality.
And finally, 12th, faux pas. A French term adopted into English, meaning a significant or embarrassing error in judgment or social etiquette.
We identified using a mobile phone at the dinner table as the ultimate modern social faux pas because it violates the central ritual of presence.
So by internalizing the application and the context of these 12 terms, you really transition from merely commenting on a meal to engaging in a sophisticated critical evaluation of culinary science, sociology, and culture.
You're now equipped not just to eat, but to analyze the deeper meaning of the experience with proficiency and nuance. So if we bring together all the complex threads we've discussed today, from the genetic structure of taste to the sociological rule of the table, it becomes undeniably clear that food culture is a powerful intersection of diverse, often conflicting fields.
Absolutely.
We saw chemistry at play with olfactory receptors, sociology dictating our need for conviviality and defining the modern faux pas, and anthropology guiding our battles over authenticity and respectful amalgamation.
And the sources you shared really emphasize that the joy of this subject lies in that complexity and in the inherent contradictions. The next time you encounter a fierce food debate, or you sit down for a meal in a beautiful or even a lackluster setting, you now have the advanced linguistic tools to analyze every single element. You can distinguish between genuine scientific reality, like the genetic divide of cilantro, and pure rhetorical hyperbole, like the use of sacrilege to describe a pizza topping.
And that ability to see the structure beneath the argument and to use the precise language to articulate it, that is the true sign of a well-informed learner.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. We discussed extensively how culinary stagnation is the enemy of progress, and how some of history's greatest dishes were born from the mixing of cultures, the respectful amalgamation of traditions. But if that is the case, if we agree that progress relies on blending, at what point does the act of fiercely preserving a tradition, insisting on absolute authenticity, itself become a form of gatekeeping?
Or worse, a form of stagnation.
Exactly.
It's a profound philosophical question of history versus the future, one that every chef, every critic, and certainly every informed diner must wrestle with. Is the purist merely holding back the next great culinary evolution?
Something to ponder over your next plate of the unexpected. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the delectable world of culinary controversy.
Until next time, bon appétit.
All right, welcome back to The Deep Dive. This is the show, where we dig into a whole stack of sources, the articles, the research, all the data, and we try to pull out the crucial nuggets you need to really master the conversation. We don't just summarize.
No, we synthesize.
Yeah.
And today we're casting a hard gaze forward.
Yeah.
We're looking straight into the culinary crystal ball, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. We're moving beyond, the latest restaurant review. We're trying to focus on the big picture, the systemic, ethical, and technological shifts that are already redefining how food actually lands on your plate.
And it's happening so fast.
It really is.
Yeah.
So our deep dive today is really custom tailored to give you mastery over one of the most, volatile and innovative sectors of the global economy, and that is the future of food.
Right.
We've got source material that explores some really high-level concepts. We're talking about next-generation protein sources, everything from these incredibly refined plant-based alternatives all the way to the truly revolutionary potential of cultivated meat.
And it doesn't stop there. We also need to tackle the massive efficiency problems. I mean, the problems plaguing the current system.
Particularly food waste.
Oh, food waste
Yeah.
is a huge one. And then there are these strange consumption trends, driven by hypermarketing, like the whole superfood obsession.
Right, the magic bullet solution.
Exactly. So our mission really is to move you beyond just sort of being aware of this stuff.
Right, beyond the headline.
We want to get to true insight, understanding not just what these new food techs are, but the fundamental, the quandaries, the moral questions, the economic hurdles, the logistics.
All the things that stand between us and a truly sustainable global food supply. It's a lot to unpack.
It is. It's a mix of science, morality, and marketing all braided together.
So before we really jump in, just think about this for a second. Have you, dipped your toes into this rapidly evolving world? Have you tried that bleeding edge alternative protein burger or maybe ordered one of those ugly produce boxes?
It's becoming more and more common.
It is. So, okay, let's unpack this. And I think we have to start with the unavoidable core of the entire discussion.
Yeah, you really do. Because it's genuinely impossible to have a meaningful discussion about modern food production without addressing sustainability.
It's the foundation of everything else we're going to talk about.
It is. The two concepts are no longer separate. They're fundamentally welded together. This isn't some niche consideration for, a small group of consumers anymore.
No, not at all.
It's the core of the global food dilemma. It's the elephant in the room.
And when we talk about sustainability in food, we're really framing two major sort of interlocking pressures that are justifying this massive global shift away from traditional methods. So what are those two pressures?
Okay, so the first one, which we just have to acknowledge up front, is the fundamental ethical dilemma.
Right.
The one presented by traditional food production. Specifically, we're talking about the industrial scale of animal slaughter and the welfare of sentient beings that are being used as commodities.
And that concern, which is really driven by a rising consumer consciousness, it provides the moral framework for all the change we're seeing.
It does. But the moral argument, as powerful as it is, it only gains real, global traction when it connects directly to the second pressure.
Which is the quantifiable environmental burden.
Exactly. That is the engine that's driving the innovation budgets. That's where the billions of dollars are coming from.
So we need to justify this huge push toward alternatives. And the best way to do that is by detailing the astronomical cost of traditional animal agriculture.
Right. Let's look at the numbers. A good place to start is the feed conversion ratio, or FCR.
Okay, what is that exactly?
It's basically how many units of feed-like kilograms of grain are required to produce 1 unit of animal biomass, 1 kilogram of meat. And the inefficiency there it's stark.
How stark are we talking?
Well, for chicken, it's pretty efficient, relatively speaking. It's around 2 to 1. For pigs, it's more like 3 to 1.
Okay, so 3 pounds of feed for 1 pound of pork.
Roughly, yeah. But for beef, depending on the system, that ratio can just shoot up to 10, sometimes even 20 to 1.
20 to 1. So for every 20 calories of grain we're feeding a cow, we're maybe getting 1 calorie back as beef.
That's the math. And that massive conversion loss, it represents wasted land, wasted water, and wasted energy on just an overwhelming scale.
Overwhelming is definitely the right word. I mean, think about the land use alone. Our sources say that globally, traditional livestock farming uses nearly 80% of all agricultural land. 80%.
It's an unbelievable figure. And yet, it only provides about 18% of global calories.
Just think about that imbalance for a second.
Yeah. Vast tracts of arable land that we could be using to grow food directly for humans, are instead dedicated to growing feed for livestock.
Mostly corn and soy.
Primarily corn and soy.
Yeah.
And this is the #1 driver of deforestation in critical regions like the Amazon basin. It's an environmental cost that is it's becoming very difficult to absorb long term.
And that's just the land. When we look beyond the land, the metrics for water and emissions are, they're equally challenging for the industry.
They are. And they're crucial factors that I think the average consumer often underestimates or just isn't aware of. Water usage in traditional farming is staggering.
Give us an example.
To produce a single pound of beef, it's estimated to require thousands of gallons of water.
Thousands.
Yeah, when you factor in everything, the irrigation for the feed crops, the drinking water for the animals themselves, and all the processing. Now, Compare that to plant-based proteins like lentils or beans.
A completely different story.
A completely different story. The water usage there is orders of magnitude lower per calorie of protein you get out.
Okay, so we've got land, we've got water, and then you have the emissions profile, which is really dominated by methane.
Exactly, methane. It comes primarily from what's called the enteric fermentation process in ruminants, like cattle.
That's a nice way of putting it.
It is. And the key thing to know is that methane is a greenhouse gas that's far more potent than carbon dioxide, even though it stays in the atmosphere for a shorter time.
So when you add it all up, the land, the water, the methane, the collective environmental footprint makes the case for innovation not just like a preference.
No, it makes it a geopolitical necessity. The goal here is to justify the complete move away from these methods that have such an incredibly high environmental cost.
So the motivation for all this innovation isn't just about making a better tasting veggie burger. It's driven by pure necessity and resource limitation.
Absolutely. And that necessity has catalyzed an enormous amount of investment and, frankly, some genuine scientific genius in the plant-based sector, especially over the last decade.
And that's the great pivot we've seen, right? Because 10 years ago, the plant-based option was often just an afterthought.
Oh, totally. It was that dry, monochromatic patty made of, highly processed soy, the thing you ate if you had no other choice.
But not anymore.
Not at all. Now, the focus is on creating these sophisticated molecular analogs. Companies are using things like precision fermentation, advanced texturization, and really detailed flavor chemistry.
They're trying to mimic not just the texture of meat.
No, it's about the entire experience of eating it, the way it cooks, the way it smells, the way the fat renders in the pan.
Right.
That's the holy grail.
And the innovation is so explosive that these products are often designed not just for, say, strict vegans or vegetarians.
No, not all.
They're targeting a much larger, much more economically powerful segment, which is the flexitarian market.
That is the demographic darling of the food tech world right now. The flexitarian is the consumer who is actively reducing their meat consumption, but without eliminating it entirely.
Right. They might do meatless Mondays or something.
Exactly. And they're driven by a mix of things: health concerns, environmental awareness, and just plain curiosity. They still want the flavor experience of meat, but they're perfectly willing to swap out their Tuesday night burger for a plant-based alternative.
If the quality is high enough.
That's the key. If the quality is there.
And our sources confirm the power of this segment. Targeting the flexitarian market, it just lowers the barrier to mainstream adoption so much.
It does. Because if a plant-based alternative tastes 95% as good as the traditional product, and it's competitively priced, and it uses 90% fewer resources,
then the economic and environmental argument for making that swap just becomes overwhelming.
It's about making the sustainable choice the easy choice.
Not the choice that requires sacrifice.
Precisely. It creates this powerful market incentive for sustainability. If we can achieve that quality and cost parity, the sheer resource inefficiency of the traditional systems, all that land, all that water, it'll simply be priced out of the modern food chain.
But, even with all the success in the plant-based space, there are still some cravings that plant protein, however sophisticated it gets, still struggles to satisfy.
That's true.
That craving for the sensory experience of actual animal protein, but without the animal. And that brings us squarely to the most revolutionary and perhaps the most controversial area of food technology today.
Cultivated meat.
Yeah, cultivated meat. And this is the moment we really cross into what felt like pure science fiction only a few years ago.
It really did. We're talking about genuine meat grown ex vivo, which just means outside the body. And it is rapidly becoming a commercial reality.
I mean, there are several products that have already gained regulatory approval in countries like Singapore and the US. It's not science fiction anymore.
No, it's here.
So for you listening, let's make sure the definition is crystal clear because there's so much confusing terminology out there. Lab-grown, cell-based, clean meat.
It's a mess. Proponents really prefer cultivated because it sounds less sterile than lab-grown.
Right. So cultivated meat is defined as meat grown from animal cells. These cells are harvested once, painlessly, usually from a small biopsy.
A bit like a small skin sample.
Exactly. Those cells are then placed in a nutrient-rich growth medium inside something called a bioreactor.
Which is basically a sterile, controlled environment. Think of it like a fermentation tank for beer, but for meat cells.
And in there, the cells proliferate and differentiate into muscle and fat tissue. So it's biologically identical meat without ever needing to raise or slaughter a full animal.
The process itself is revolutionary, and the core arguments driving its development are powerful and multifaceted.
So let's detail those arguments. From a systemic point of view, why are governments and major investors getting so enthusiastic about this?
Well, as we just touched on, it fundamentally solves the resource problem in a completely new way. Cultivated meat production just drastically reduces the resource footprint.
By how much?
Initial estimates suggest it uses significantly less land, up to 99% less than conventional beef.
99%?
And drastically less water, because you're completely eliminating the need to grow acres and acres of feed crops.
And crucially, it also removes that massive environmental liability we talked about, methane production.
Gone. Since there are no ruminants involved, there's no methane. It basically moves protein production indoors and makes it modular.
What do you mean by modular?
The potential for decentralized, hyper-efficient production is enormous. Imagine growing a year's supply of chicken in a facility the size of a large warehouse right next to a major city.
So it completely changes the supply chain.
It simplifies the entire thing. It eliminates long-haul transport, and it increases food security by making local production feasible literally anywhere.
Even in deserts or
space. That's one of the long-term applications people are exploring.
Wow, okay. And from the ethical standpoint, it seems like a complete slam dunk. It totally solves that original ethical quandary.
It does. The necessity of animal suffering or large-scale industrial slaughter is just eliminated. It's meat without the moral cost attached.
So when you look at the logical case, the environmental case, and the ethical case, it is overwhelmingly persuasive.
It really is. But, and this is a huge but,
right.
We have to address the colossal hurdle that lies between the laboratory and your supermarket shelf. And this isn't just a regulatory hurdle, though that's significant.
It's the psychological barrier.
The psychological barrier, the deep-seated yuck factor.
Yeah, our sources are very clear on this. For many consumers, the idea of cultivated meat just evokes this slightly dystopian imagery.
It feels inherently unnatural.
Right. It feels removed from this deeply ingrained human concept of, sun and soil and fields.
And this is a classic case of what psychologists call food neophobia, a reluctance to try foods that are perceived as alien or manufactured.
So when you tell someone their steak was grown in a stainless steel bioreactor,
they immediately associate it with chemicals, sterility, and processing, not with clean, natural protein.
Even though, ironically, a closed, sterile environment is far more controllable and potentially safer than, say, an open-air feedlot environment.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's a conflict between scientific fact and deep cultural conditioning. We've been conditioned for generations to link concepts like farm fresh and grass-fed with quality.
Even if those terms often mask underlying inefficiencies or animal welfare issues.
Exactly. Cultivated meat requires abandoning that conditioning entirely.
And this whole thing is compounded by the technical challenges the industry is still, grappling with, which often contributes to that sense of the uncanny.
It's a good way to put it. The most significant hurdles right now aren't just achieving taste, but achieving structure.
What do you mean by structure?
Well, it's relatively easy to grow cells into a loose ground meat structure, like for a burger patty or a nugget.
Okay.
It is exponentially harder to create the complex fibrous structure of a steak or a chicken breast. The muscle fibers, the connective tissue, the intramuscular fat marbling. That's the real challenge.
So the challenge isn't just growing the cells, it's creating the architecture of the meat itself.
Precisely. And this requires sophisticated, edible scaffolding.
Scaffolding?
Yeah. Imagine a kind of biological 3D printer that lays down a matrix, often made of plant materials or biodegradable polymers, to encourage the cells to grow in a particular complex alignment.
And that must be expensive.
It is. Scaffolding is very expensive, and it's a huge technological bottleneck in scaling up high-quality, structured cuts of meat.
And the other great challenge I'm seeing in the sources is just the basic economics. Right now, the cost of the growth medium, that nutrient broth that feeds the cells, is astronomically high.
It's the biggest cost bottleneck by far. It often uses pharmaceutical-grade components that just drive the cost per pound way above any conventional product.
So what's in this growth medium?
It's essentially a specialized serum. It contains salts, amino acids, vitamins, and most importantly, these crucial growth factors, which are often recombinant proteins.
And getting the cost of those down is the key.
It's the major financial engineering hurdle. Until they can make that growth medium commodity-priced cultivated meat just cannot achieve cost parity with traditional poultry or pork, let alone beef.
Let's talk about the indistinguishability tests that our sources mention. This is a hypothetical, right?
Yes.
If, hypothetically, cultivated meat were truly indistinguishable from a traditional steak taste, texture, nutritional value, everything, and it were affordable, then the logical environmental argument dictates a switch.
The logic is unassailable.
Right. If the sensory experience is identical, why would you choose the product that causes massive environmental damage?
You wouldn't. Or at least it becomes very difficult to justify on a global scale. And this is why the technology demands a paradigm shift.
That's the key term here, a paradigm shift. It means a fundamental, pervasive change in how we perceive and define something. So what does that shift look like for food?
Well, for millennia, meat has equaled an animal, period. The paradigm shift requires us to redefine meat as a biochemical structure.
Just a specific arrangement of proteins and fats.
Exactly, an arrangement that can be produced efficiently, independent of the animal's body. And this shift isn't just about accepting lab-grown steak. It's about opening the door to molecular efficiency in all food production.
It's an acceptance that highly controlled, sophisticated manufacturing can, in fact, be cleaner and safer than traditional open-air, complex biological systems.
That's the core of this shift.
But I do worry about one thing. By concentrating production in these highly technical, capital-intensive bioreactors, are we maybe creating a new ethical dilemma?
In what way?
One of centralization. Does cultivated meat just end up putting the control of the global food supply into the hands of a few powerful tech corporations, moving it away from, diversified traditional farming communities?
That is a highly important counterargument, and it's one that's raised by food sovereignty advocates all the time.
They're worried about a corporate monoculture.
That's the term they use, yeah. They argue that this technology, while it might solve environmental problems, creates a huge risk of corporate control. We would need robust regulatory oversight, and we'd need to ensure the technology can be democratized or localized, rather than being patented and controlled by a handful of global players.
So it's another ethical tension. Solving the environmental problem while potentially making the economic inequality problem worse.
It is. It's a fascinating high-stakes battle. It involves hard science, massive investment, and deep cultural psychology. The industry's greatest hurdle, really, isn't the technology of the bioreactor.
It's overcoming that powerful, immediate yuck factor.
And proving that this is a system that can benefit everyone, not just shareholders.
And speaking of efficiency, whether we're talking about growing meat in a lab or planting crops in the field, efficiency is paramount. Which brings us to the astonishing efficiency problem that currently plagues our existing food system.
The catastrophic issue of food waste.
It is, it's difficult to pivot from discussing these cutting-edge future technologies like cultivated meat back to the current state of our global supply chain without a sense of, deep collective frustration.
It really is, because the contrast is truly staggering, isn't it? We're sitting here debating billion-dollar technologies to produce protein more efficiently, while at the same time, we are trashing absurd amounts of perfectly good food.
For reasons that are, frankly, often just bizarre. Systemic inefficiency and strange cosmetic standards.
So we absolutely have to focus on the exorbitant amount of food waste in the world. Our sources highlight these truly staggering statistics that should shock everyone listening.
Which is that it's estimated a full 1/3 of all food produced globally is either lost or wasted.
Just let's sit with that statistic for a moment. 1/3.
It's mind-boggling.
That is food that consumed massive amounts of land, water, fertilizer, energy, and labor. All for what? To ultimately end up in a landfill or just left to rot in a field.
And once it hits the landfill, it decomposes anaerobically and generates more methane.
Further compounding the very environmental problem we were just talking about in section 1.
Yeah.
It's a failure at every single level of the system.
And the breakdown of where this waste occurs is really illuminating. It's not just, you and me forgetting some vegetables in the back of the fridge.
Right. Well, consumer waste is significant, and we should talk about that. A massive amount of the loss occurs upstream, at the farm and the distribution level.
This is where the root cause becomes almost farcical. A huge portion of farm-level and retail waste is driven by purely cosmetic standards.
The absurd heart of the supply chain failure. Supermarkets and large distributors hold farmers to these incredibly stringent aesthetic standards.
They prioritize how something looks over its nutritional value. A crooked carrot, a slightly scarred pepper, a potato with a small bump on it.
All of these items are just rejected wholesale. Farmers are forced to practice what they call culling, discarding vast quantities of perfectly nutritious crops before they ever even leave the farm gate.
And this demand for flawless produce, it just reflects a broader societal culture of excess and disposability.
Oh, for sure. Consumers, especially in developed nations, have been conditioned by glossy advertising to expect idealized, uniform-looking produce.
So the retailers, fearing that anything less than perfect will just sit on the shelf unsold, enforce these standards rigorously.
And the economic implications are massive. We, the consumers, end up absorbing the cost of all this.
How so?
Well, the farmer has to overproduce significantly just to ensure enough perfect specimens make it past the retail gatekeepers. The costs of all that wasted production, all that wasted labor and resources,
are then baked into the price of the perfect produce that we end up buying.
Exactly. It's a huge economic failure disguised as a quality standard. We are, in effect, throwing away resources because we prioritize the look of food over its actual ability to nourish us.
It's fundamentally unsustainable. It needs a correction from both regulators and consumers.
And the problem isn't just limited to visual perfection. Another massive area of waste is driven by these confusing and overly conservative dating labels on packaging.
Ah, yes. Best by, sell by, use by.
What's the difference? Most people don't know. These dates are often based on subjective quality metrics, not on food safety.
But consumers and retailers treat them as ironclad expiration dates.
They do. Reform of date labeling is a major area of discussion among efficiency experts right now. Research shows that consumers toss food prematurely because they don't understand the difference between a date indicating peak quality, like best by, and a date indicating a potential safety risk, like use by.
And that alone contributes billions of dollars in waste every year in developed economies.
Billions.
But fortunately, we are starting to see a correction gain some significant traction among consumers, specifically addressing that aesthetic waste problem.
The rise of the ugly produce movement.
Exactly.
This movement is a brilliant market intervention. It's so smart because it tackles the cosmetic problem directly from the demand side.
You have services that will deliver or sell this ugly produce, the crooked carrots, the scarred apples, and they're growing rapidly.
And by actively buying this misshapen produce, consumers are sending a clear signal up the supply chain.
It challenges the aesthetic standards that have been set by these massive retail chains, and crucially, it gives farmers a viable secondary market for produce that would otherwise just be wasted.
And this isn't about new technology. It's not about bioreactors. It's about applied consumer consciousness.
It's a pragmatic correction. If the consumer signals that nutritional value and efficiency are more important than superficial appearance, then retailers eventually have to respond.
They either have to relax their standards or start participating in these secondary markets themselves. And what's more, these ugly produce programs often offer a tangible incentive.
A slightly reduced price.
Yeah, making efficiency economically rewarding for the consumer. It's a win-win.
This movement is essentially decoupling the idea of uniformity from the idea of quality. A slightly misshapen piece of fruit is often proof that it grew naturally, responding to its environment, rather than being optimized solely for industrial uniformity.
It suggests a growing consciousness that seeks real value, not just picture-perfect appearances.
And this is an efficiency gain that doesn't require billions in new R&D. It only requires a relatively small change in human perception and behavior.
Right. If we can just normalize these slightly imperfect vegetables, we can dramatically reduce that 1/3 of wasted food. It is perhaps the single most accessible path to immediate sustainability improvement.
This need for a perception change, for decoupling the value of food from marketing perfection, it brings us neatly to the final section of our dive today.
The pervasive influence of marketing on what we choose to consume, particularly through the never-ending search for a dietary shortcut.
So we've analyzed the future of production with cultivated meat and the efficiency of the supply chain with food waste. Now we have to turn our focus to consumption trends.
And the highly profitable human search for the magic bullet in our diet.
This is the realm of the superfood obsession. It really does seem like every single year there is a new miracle ingredient that just surfaces.
Usually from an exotic remote location.
Exactly. Promising these transformative health benefits, we cycle through these periods where, kale is king, then quinoa is the must-have grain, and then come the exotic berries like acai or goji.
And each one promises a universal solution for all your health woes.
It's important to understand the term superfood itself. It is primarily a marketing construct.
It has no strict legal or scientific definition. Yeah, none at all. And while these foods are undoubtedly nutritious.
Of course.
The marketing that surrounds them elevates them to an almost mythical status, often promising results that no single food could possibly deliver.
My viewpoint here, and the healthy skepticism we've drawn from our sources, is highly guarded. While these foods may be nutrient-dense, the marketing claims are often just hyperbolic.
Let's define that term clearly, because it really describes the entire phenomenon. Hyperbolic means exaggerated beyond all reasonable scientific backing.
Right.
We see claims implying these transformative effects on your energy, your lifespan, cellular repair, or disease prevention, simply by adding this one expensive ingredient to an otherwise unchanged diet.
And it feeds directly into that human desire for a quick fix, a dietary shortcut.
And that desire is precisely what allows these foods to be marketed as a panacea.
Which is another key term.
Right. The core marketing ploy is to position the latest superfood as a panacea, a remedy for all difficulties or diseases. And the expert clarification needed here is unwavering. This is a myth.
It's just not true.
It's not. No single food, regardless of its antioxidant content or its micronutrient profile, can undo the cumulative effects of a poor lifestyle.
It's a psychological trap, isn't it? If a person adds a tablespoon of expensive chia seeds or a scoop of acai powder to their heavily processed breakfast cereal and refined carbs,
they feel like they've done their part. They feel they have adequately addressed their nutritional needs for the day.
And this gives a false sense of security while they're completely neglecting the fundamental foundation of balanced whole food eating.
It's the substitution mindset versus the holistic adjustment mindset. True health and nutritional benefit requires consistency, diversification, and balance across all your macros and micronutrients.
It's the cumulative effect of a good, varied diet that yields results.
Not the sudden, occasional addition of a single expensive ingredient that you saw on social media.
We also really need to examine the economic and ethical consequences of this superfood obsession, particularly for the regions that supply them. I'm thinking of the quinoa effect.
That is such a powerful case study. Quinoa, which originates in the Andes, became globally popular in the early 2010s because of its status as a complete protein.
Right.
Global demand soared, prices skyrocketed, and while this initially benefited some of the exporting farmers, it led to massive ethical dilemmas.
Locally, the quinoa became too expensive for the indigenous populations who had traditionally relied on it as a staple food for centuries.
Yes. So the global demand, which was fueled by hyperbolic Western marketing, inadvertently created local food insecurity for the very people who cultivated it for generations. This rapid market distortion just demonstrates the problematic side effects of treating food as a magical trend rather than a stable commodity.
And this trend distracts from basic, reliable nutritional advice, which is often boring.
It's very boring, but it's true. The most effective superfoods are often the most mundane, reliable, and affordable things in the supermarket.
Like apples, broccoli, beans.
Beans, peas, standard whole grains. They're cheap, they can be locally sourced, and their nutritional benefits are incredibly well established. They don't require hyperbolic marketing because their value is proven.
Though maybe it's less exciting to the consumer who's looking for the next trend from a remote corner of the world.
The cost per nutrient comparison is damning too.
Yeah.
If you look at the price you pay for antioxidants in, say, blueberries versus the price of antioxidants in goji berries or pomegranates,
the nutritional difference is negligible.
but the marketing cost for that exotic berry, which has been flown halfway around the world, is substantial. And it's passed directly on to you, the consumer.
So the core takeaway here, for anyone listening who is trying to gain mastery over diet trends, is just to maintain constant skepticism.
Yes, do not seek a shortcut or a magic bullet. Demand consistency and diversity in your diet, and view any food that's marketed as a panacea as a suspect, highly priced trend.
A trend designed to capitalize on anxiety and the desire for instant wellness.
That's all it is.
It's really a battle between the simple, effective consistency of a holistic diet and the expensive, transient promise of a marketing trend. We're seeking efficiency in production, ethics in sourcing, and consistency in consumption. That balance is the future.
That's a perfect summation of the challenge, and it provides a really good foundation for our final synthesis. #tag outro.
This has been an extensive dive into the future of food. We've spanned everything from the deepest resource metrics all the way to the psychology of consumption. So let's quickly pull back and synthesize the core pressure points we covered today.
Okay. We began by defining the urgency of the moment. We identified sustainability as the elephant in the room,
Right, the unavoidable primary topic that has to govern all modern food discussion.
all because of the vast environmental cost and the resource inefficiency of traditional methods, particularly livestock.
And that inefficiency is what's driving the massive investment in alternatives, specifically in cultivated meat. We noted that accepting meat grown outside of an animal demands a true paradigm shift.
A complete cultural redefinition of what food even means. It forces consumers to accept biological structure over tradition.
And to overcome that really potent psychological hurdle, that yuck factor,
We then turn to the catastrophic failure of our present system, highlighting the exorbitant amount of food waste.
a third of all global production.
A third, much of which is discarded solely due to superficial cosmetic standards imposed by retailers, which just demonstrates a deep failure in supply chain efficiency and consumer conditioning.
And finally, we examine market dynamics and consumption habits, noting how the claims surrounding superfoods are often hyperbolic.
Positioning them as a panacea, a universal cure, when in reality, sustained health demands a consistent, diverse, and holistic approach.
Not a dietary shortcut or a trend.
Exactly. And understanding these concepts, the elephant in the room, the paradigm shift, exorbitant waste, hyperbolic marketing, and the myth of the panacea, that provides the necessary language to elevate your next conversation about food from just simple preference to deep insight into a systemic global issue.
And that leads us to our final thought. A provocative question for you, the learner, to carry forward. We've seen movements pushing two, diametrically opposed futures. The hyper-futuristic high-tech lab and the hyper-conscious, efficient farm.
So we'll ask you, what will humans predominantly be eating in 50 years? Will the future be dominated by these hyper-efficient synthetic alternatives? Cultivated meat, insects, algae, maybe even perfectly formulated nutritional pills where science has completely decoupled protein from land and animals.
Or will the rise in consumer consciousness, represented by things like the ugly produce movement and the push for regenerative farming, mark a necessary return to valuing traditional farming practices? Will we finally recognize nutritional worth over aesthetic perfection and decisively fix the catastrophic waste in our supply chain?
Basically, will the future of food be a sterile bioreactor, or will it be a more efficiently and consciously run farm?
That choice, driven by consumer demand and regulatory clarity, is something we are actively shaping right now.
With every dollar we spend and every choice we make at the grocery store,
Keep exploring those predictions and keep learning. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive.
goodbye for now.